Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, I am absolutely pumped for this one today. We are going to dive right into unraveling the historical truth behind literally the world's most infamous secret society.
So, let's just dive right into this by asking the absolute ultimate question. The one that fuels basically every late-night internet rabbit hole you've ever fallen down.
So, who really controls the world? It's a question that has sparked, thousands of conspiracy theories? You know the drill. We've all heard the stories of global elites, shadowy cabals, and a new world order manipulating world events from behind closed doors. But today, we're acting as investigative historians. We are going to strictly look at the documented, verifiable facts to separate the reality of the 18th century from the wild fiction of the 21st.
Now, putting on my historian hat for a second, I can tell you right off the bat that the true, documented story of the Illuminati is actually way more fascinating than any of the myths you've heard.
We're going to separate the grounded, historical reality of the Illuminati from centuries of snowballing, shape-shifting paranoia. As you'll see, we'll trace exactly how a real but incredibly short-lived group of 18th century thinkers somehow morphed into the ultimate scapegoat for everything from massive political revolutions to modern pop culture phenomena. It's like a giant historical game of telephone.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the real Bavarian Illuminati, an Enlightenment reality.
Let's strip away all that modern mysticism for a second. The Order of the Illuminati was a real Enlightenment-era secret society. It was founded on May 1, 1776 in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, by a guy named Adam Weishaupt. Now, Weishaupt was a professor of canon law, trained by Jesuits, but he became deeply, deeply influenced by the rationalist ideas of the Enlightenment. So he created this group specifically to combat religious obscurantism, superstition, and monarchical absolutism. So how did they actually operate? Well, they eventually grew to roughly 2,000 members, mostly nobles and intellectuals, and they adopted this tiered hierarchy that was heavily inspired by Freemasonry. Now, here is exactly where the modern fantasies start to creep in. Members used ancient aliases. Weishaupt literally called himself Spartacus, and they referred to Munich as Athens. But their use of secret codes and ancient names, that was just a practical cover to avoid government suppression and surveillance. I mean, ironically, these totally practical cover names are what fueled centuries of supernatural fantasies. It wasn't a nefarious plot for world domination. Their actual goal was emancipation through reason and critical thinking.
Look at this quote right here, because it really hits the nail on the head. The Order of the Illuminati was designed to oppose superstition, clerical influence over public life, and what Weishaupt characterized as abuses of state power. Weishaupt's original project reflected these genuine Enlightenment contradictions. He wanted to build a society based on freedom and reason, but, he tried to do it through strict secrecy and hierarchical control.
Which brings us to Section 2, the actual dissolution in 1785, a short lifespan. Just take a look at this timeline. It's incredibly brief. 1776, we have the foundation. By 1782, they're participating in the convent of Wilhelmsbad, that's a major Masonic gathering, trying to spread their rationalist ideas. But this rapid expansion, it completely alarmed the authorities. So in 1784, the Elector of Bavaria issues edicts banning unauthorized secret societies, and boom, by 1785, the order is officially suppressed, their documents are seized, and Weishaupt is forced to flee. This group literally lasted barely a decade.
I really need to emphasize just how final this was for our skeptical listeners out there. Zero historical evidence of the order's survival exists after the Bavarian edicts of 1787. Zero. Real fraternal organizations leave archival traces, right? Financial accounts, letters, charters. The actual Bavarian Illuminati left exactly those kinds of traces right up until 1785. But after the government raids, the paper trail completely stops. The institutional entity absolutely ceased to exist.
So, on to Section 3, Birth of a Global Scapegoat, the French Revolution Phantom.
This raises a huge, obvious question. If the group completely died out in 1785, why on earth are we still talking about them today? Notice this stark contrast. On one side, the historical reality, a mundane group of about 2,000 Enlightenment thinkers that dissolved in 1785. On the other side, the conspiratorial myth, immortal global elites, architects of a new world order, surviving in the shadows for centuries. How do we get from point A to point B?
Well, it all started with the absolute panic over the French Revolution. In the late 1790s, reactionary authors like the French Jesuit priest Augustin Barruel and the Scottish physicist John Robison basically manufactured the Illuminati scare. They wrote these massively popular books claiming the Illuminati hadn't actually died, but had just gone underground to orchestrate the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror. They created a huge paper trail that fueled an 18th century panic, essentially using the Illuminati as a scapegoat to explain away the terrifying, chaotic historical events of the era.
And this panic spread like wildfire across the Atlantic. Check out this quote from Jedediah Morse, a very prominent American intellectual, right during the 1798 scare in the U.S. He says, "The evidence that he had gathered ought to exempt any person from the charge of weakness or credulity who believes the Illuminati conspiracy authentic." He, along with others, used transatlantic networks to validate these fears. It just shows how incredibly fast this phantom enemy became a completely global scapegoat.
All right, let's fast forward to Section 4, the 1970s sci-fi revival, from politics to pop culture.
Throughout the 20th century, this myth just kept mutating. In the 1920s, fascist propagandists linked it to communist and financial elites. In the 60s, you have the John Birch Society accusing U.S. think tanks of being Illuminati fronts. But then, something absolutely wild happens in 1975. Robert Anton Wilson publishes the Illuminatus trilogy. And suddenly, by the 1980s, the lore is merging with UFOs and alien invasions. It went from reactionary politics to this all-encompassing, unfalsifiable umbrella. I mean, think about the staggering leap from 18th century guys reading philosophy in Bavaria to shape-shifting reptilians secretly running the government. It is absolutely ridiculous, but it completely stuck.
And the supreme irony of all this? The Illuminatus trilogy was a literal satire. It was a 1970s counterculture sci-fi joke intended to poke fun at the paranoia of the era. They purposefully blamed every major cover-up on the Illuminati just for laughs. But instead of laughing, a huge chunk of the public mistakenly took this satire as literal truth. This sci-fi fiction accidentally served as the master blueprint for modern conspiracy theorists.
Which leads us perfectly into our final section, Section 5, Fiction Outweighs Historical Accuracy, the Modern Myth.
Let's trace exactly how this pop culture transformation played out. Step 1, Augustin Barruel invents the political conspiracy to explain the French Revolution. Step 2, 1970s sci-fi literature revives it as a joke. Step 3, fast forward to the year 2000, and Dan Brown's mega-hit novel Angels and Demons cements the Illuminati as this explosive, fictional villain trope in the modern mind. And Step 4, modern media takes over. From the Tomb Raider movies to music videos by artists like Jay-Z, they create this recognized aesthetic shorthand. The Eye of Providence on the back of the dollar bill becomes the pop culture symbol for the group, totally divorcing the name from its actual 18th century roots.
So we end up in this massive echo chamber of conspiracy. Why do these myths persist when we know for a fact the group dissolved in 1785? Honestly, because a unified fictional villain pulling the strings of the world is just an easier, way more comforting narrative to digest than the random, unguided, and often chaotic reality of actual world history. Human nature just desperately wants to find patterns in the chaos.
So I want to leave you with this to chew on. If a secret society that lasted only a decade, was rooted in boring old rationalism, and had barely 2,000 members, can somehow conquer the global imagination for centuries as these ultimate supernatural villains, what other historical facts that we accept today are really just well-told fictions? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep digging into the evidence, and keep questioning what you see out there, but always, always ground your search in the facts. So, what do you think? Are you ready to leave the rabbit hole behind? And I'll catch you next time.